My name is Evadne Walker, and at 68 I considered myself a woman who'd learned to handle most things with grace. Widowhood had toughened me. Raising 3 children had humbled me, and decades of balancing checkbooks had kept me sharp. I prided myself on being careful, reliable, the sort of person who kept receipts in neat envelopes. That morning at JFK Airport, suitcase in hand, I thought I was about to embark on the trip of a lifetime with my daughter. Instead, I learned that even the most meticulous woman can be blindsided. We were standing near the gate when Maya turned to me. Her hair was perfectly styled, her coat belted in that effortless way she always managed. She leaned close, her voice light, almost teasing. "Oops, Mom," she said. "I forgot your ticket. Go home, maybe next time." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. The loudspeaker announced final boarding for Paris. The line of families with passports in hand shuffled forward, and my mind tried to make sense of the words. Surely she meant something else. Surely there was a mix-up. But then I saw her eyes. They gleamed with something that wasn't embarrassment or apology. It was satisfaction. A cool, quiet triumph that made my stomach turn. I froze where I stood. My boarding documents gripped so tightly, my knuckles ached. Passengers streamed past me, couples with children tugging stuffed animals, retirees with matching neck pillows. The excitement in the air was palpable, and I stood among it like a statue, my face burning. "Don't look at me like that," Maya added, shifting her designer carry-on higher on her shoulder. "We'll call when we get there." Her tone was airy casual, as if she were brushing me aside at a grocery store, rather than at the gate for a flight I had paid for. Paid for in full? Every seat, every hotel room, every guided tour. $39,000 withdrawn from my savings without hesitation. Because I wanted my daughter and her 2 children to have a Christmas they'd never forget. I caught sight of my grandson, Theo, 14, who stared at the floor, as though the pattern in the carpet could swallow him. My granddaughter, Lena, pretended to scroll her phone, though I noticed her fingers weren't moving. Neither looked at me. Neither spoke. The gate agent called their row. Maya handed over 4 boarding passes. Hers, her husband's, the children's. Not mine. She gave me one last smile, a little shrug, then disappeared into the tunnel. I was left standing at the rope-lined suitcase at my side while the agent turned away to greet the next family. My throat felt dry, my body cold despite the heat of the crowded terminal. The final door clicked shut, and the plane pushed back from the gate. I remained still for a long moment before I pulled my coat tighter and turned toward the exit. By the time I reached the taxi line, my humiliation had cooled into something else. Something steadier, quieter. And as the cab carried me back toward Westchester, I began to replay how this had all begun. The cab hummed along the parkway, back toward Westchester, headlights blurring in the early dusk. I leaned my head against the cool window and tried to steady my breathing. Humiliation has a way of dragging you backward, forcing you to replay every moment that led to the collapse. And so, without meaning to my mind, slid back to the afternoon Maya first painted Paris for me. It was October, the leaves along my street turning crisp and golden when she came by the house. She rarely visited alone anymore. She had a talent for arriving with the children in tow, their laughter softening me before she asked for favors or help. But that afternoon it was just her coat, unbuttoned cheeks pink from the brisk air. She came into the kitchen carrying a folder and an eagerness that felt almost girlish. "Mom," she began, slipping into the chair across from me. "I've been thinking. The kids are growing up so fast. Lena will be in college before we know it. Theo's already talking about high school baseball teams. We don't have much time left to make real family memories." Her voice trembled on the word family, and it reached into the hollow place I carried since Robert's death 5 years earlier. Holidays had grown quieter, dinners shorter. Invitations came less often. That single word filled me with hope. She spread the folder open on the table. Inside were glossy printouts, the Eiffel Tower lit like a golden torch against the December sky. Children ice skating near the Hôtel de Ville, the Champs-Élysées, strung with lights like a river of stars. Christmas in Paris, she said, her eyes shining. Can you imagine croissants every morning, hot chocolate in cafes, strolling along the Seine, wrapped in scarves? The kids would never forget it. She spoke in detail, as if she had already been there. A charming hotel tucked near the Arc de Triomphe, a boat tour beneath bridges older than our country, a special Christmas dinner at a restaurant where she promised families toasted tradition with glasses that clinked like bells. I found myself smiling, despite the practicality tugging at me. She knew how to weave an image. I could see us there, bundled against the cold Lena, photographing everything with her phone. Theo pointing out gargoyles on Notre Dame. For a moment, the loneliness of my dining room dissolved, and I was sitting at a Parisian cafe table, my family gathered around me. Maya reached across the table, her hand brushing mine. I'll handle everything. Flights, hotels, tours. You've done enough all these years, let me take care of the details. All you have to do is relax and enjoy it. It sounded generous, but there was calculation in the way she added almost casually. Of course, 5 people for a week in Paris during the holidays. It won't be cheap. I know Michael and I can't swing it all. The practical voice inside me whispered caution. But I remembered Robert's last Christmas, how thin his hands looked as he carved the turkey. How he had whispered, "Promise me you'll keep them close." I wanted to honor that promise. I wanted to believe my daughter truly wanted me there. So I reached for my checkbook. How much I asked. Her smile widened triumphant, but dressed in gratitude. About $39,000 should cover everything. Flights, hotels, tours, even a little extra for Christmas dinner. First class all the way. Something unforgettable. The number made my chest tighten, but I forced a laugh. Unforgettable indeed. I wrote the check carefully, the pen scratching across paper like a quiet vow. I didn't question. I didn't ask to see breakdowns or receipts. When she folded the check into her folder, I told myself it was worth every dollar to buy, not just a trip, but belonging. That night, alone in the house, I pictured the lights of Paris reflected in my grandchildren's eyes. I let the vision lull me to sleep, never imagining that what she sold me wasn't a dream at all, but the first thread of a cruel design. For the first week after handing Maya the check, I let myself drift on the warmth of anticipation. I bought a new suitcase, something lighter than the battered one Robert and I had shared on our last trip together. I flipped through a French phrase book at the library and even practiced a few greetings aloud in the kitchen, amused by how clumsy my tongue felt around bonjour. But when I tried to talk to Maya about the details, something shifted. I was thinking we could visit the Louvre, first thing I said, one afternoon on the phone. That way we avoid the crowds. Oh, don't worry about that, Mom. She cut me off quickly. I've got it all handled. You just focus on packing. It's supposed to be a surprise. Her voice was sweet, but firm in a way that discouraged further questions. The next time I asked about the hotel, she only laughed. Relax. You'll love it. Just wait until you see. It wasn't like her to be evasive. Usually Maya loved to show off every detail of her plans. The exact boutique she'd found for a dress, the restaurant she swore was better than all the rest. This new secrecy didn't fit. Still, I told myself it was excitement that maybe she wanted to impress me with a grand reveal. 2 weeks later, she called again, her tone brisk. Mom, just making sure your passport is up to date, right? Yes, of course, I replied. I renewed it last year. Perfect. Could you send me a photo of the main page? The airlines need it for the reservation? I hesitated, a strange unease curling in my stomach. But then I thought of how often I'd struggled with online forms, how Maya always seemed so confident with computers. I snapped a picture and sent it before doubt could fester. She texted back a line of cheerful emojis. The first true crack appeared a week before our supposed departure. I had gone to the mall for winter scarves, imagining myself walking the Champs-Élysées in something soft and bright. As I crossed the food court, I spotted Maya seated with her friend Claudia, a woman I knew only vaguely from family gatherings. I was about to wave when I heard Maya's voice sharper than I was used to. "I still can't believe you're actually doing this," Claudia said, shaking her head. Maya laughed low and clipped. "She'll learn. Money doesn't buy you a place where you're not wanted." The words landed like ice water poured down my back. I froze, clutching my shopping bag so tightly the paper crinkled. Claudia looked troubled. "But 39,000, Maya. That's not pocket change. Isn't it?" "Cruel, she'll get over it," Maya replied, brushing invisible crumbs from the table. "Besides, someone has to teach her. She thinks she can pay her way into everything." "Well, not this time." I stepped behind a pillar, my pulse pounding in my ears. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. Was I hearing correctly? Could my own daughter really be speaking about me with that coldness? I backed away before either of them saw me, the bag cutting into my palm. The drive home felt endless. Every mile the words replayed, "Money doesn't buy you a place." By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had convinced myself I'd misunderstood. Perhaps she'd been talking about someone else, or joking poorly. Maya was under stress juggling the children bills her marriage. Maybe I'd caught her in a bitter moment. I wanted so badly to believe that. So I folded the scarf neatly into my drawer, tucked away the unease with it, and told myself Paris would heal whatever small fractures lingered between us. The cab slid away from JFK, merging into the traffic that pulsed toward the bridges. I sat stiffly in the back seat, my suitcase balanced upright beside me like a mute witness. The driver hummed softly with the radio, oblivious to the storm inside me. The humiliation from the gate still burned in my cheeks, but beneath it, something steadier began to form. Years ago, after Robert died, I cried every night for months. I knew what it was to collapse, to dissolve into salt water. Tonight, though, I felt none of that softness. Tears would not help me. The voice in my head was firm. "Don't react, respond." Streetlights flickered across the windshield as the cab turned onto the highway. I gripped the leather strap of my purse, inhaled deeply, and forced myself to replay each detail. The moment Maya brushed past me, the flash of guilt in Theo's eyes, the way Lena had hidden hers behind a glowing phone screen. No accident, no mix-up. This was deliberate, and deliberate actions demanded deliberate answers. By the time we pulled into my driveway in Westchester, the outline of my response had begun to take shape. I paid the fare, rolled my suitcase to the porch, and let myself into the house. The silence welcomed me, warm and steady. I set a kettle on the stove, brewed tea as I always did after travel, even though this time I had gone nowhere. Then I carried the steaming mug into the dining room where my laptop waited. The old oak table, scarred from decades of family dinners, became my desk for battle. I opened my email. There it was, a string of confirmations Maya had forwarded over the last 2 months. Hotels, tours, flights. Each one sent from her address but with my name attached. Each one charged to my card. My meticulous husband had once told me, "Keep records evadden. Paper is power." Paper is. Tonight, I finally understood. The hotel first. Plaza Arc, the subject line read, 2 adjoining suites, check-in December 15th. Under reservation holder, my name appeared in bold. At the bottom, a line in small type, flexible rate, full refund available if canceled 24 hours prior. I sipped my tea, savoring the taste of jasmine as a smile tugged at my lips. Next flights. Business class JFK to Charles de Gaulle. 5 passengers. $3 $900 each. Again, my name listed as primary contact. These would be trickier, but the terms promised partial refunds. Then the river cruise, the guided tour of Versailles, the Christmas dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant. Each reservation lined up neatly like dominoes waiting for a finger's push. I opened a notebook from the sideboard drawer, flipped to a clean page, and began to list them one by one. My handwriting, once praised for its clarity by secretaries at Robert's firm, flowed in steady strokes. Hotel, $3 $800. Flights, $19 after fees. Tours, $6 $200. Restaurants, $2 $300. Line after line, the total rising toward that staggering $39,000. For a long moment, I simply stared at the number. A lifetime of savings spent not on my grandchildren's college fund or my own retirement comforts, but on an elaborate trap set by my own child. The shame of it pressed against my ribs. But beneath the shame was steel. I closed the notebook, pressed my palms flat against the cover, and whispered into the quiet room, "Not this time." I would not beg them to fix what they had broken. I would not fund their betrayal with silence. If they thought they could erase me from a trip I had paid for, they had forgotten who held the receipts. The teacup was empty by the time I shut down the laptop. My plan was still forming sharp edges glinting in the dark, but I knew this much: I would not react like the woman they thought I was. I would respond. With precision. I started with the hotel because it felt simplest, the softest place to begin unpicking what they'd stitched together. The Plaza Arcs confirmation email sat at the top of my inbox like an accusation. 2 adjoining suites, confirmation number, dates. I clicked, found the cancellation policy, and smiled in a way that surprised me, small and private, like the curl of steam from my teacup. The phone call took less than 10 minutes. On the second ring, a woman answered with a lilting accent and the kind of politeness that comes from long practice. Plaza Arc Reservations. "This is Marie. How may I help you, Madame Walker?" I explained calmly that a family emergency required a cancellation. I imagined Marie making the administrative motions I'd seen 1,000 times when Robert called the office routine procedural competent. "You purchased the flexible rate, Madame," she said, after checking a few keystrokes. "You are within the refund window. I can cancel both suites and issue a full refund to your card. You will see the credit in 3 to 5 business days." Relief was immediate and sour like lemon. The hotel vanished from their itinerary with a single click, and a confirmation email slid into my inbox. $3 $800 back in the pipeline. 1 down. Next, I moved on to the tours, the river cruise, the Louvre private guide, the day trip to Versailles. Each company had its own set of rules, its own human voice on the other end of the line. Some insisted on a partial fee. Some offered credits. The Versailles booking manager, a patient Englishman, tipped his virtual hat and said, "We can reschedule for a later date, Madame, or process a refund minus the administrative fee." I chose refunds wherever possible. Each ding of email that arrived, refund, processed, credit, issued, sounded like a small bell of justice in my kitchen. Flights were trickier. The airline had business class fares with stricter rules. My fingers hovered over the Manage Booking tab for longer than I'd like to admit. There were penalties, of course. The best-case scenario was partial refunds to the card on file. The worst case would be vouchers or non-refundable tickets. I booked 3 calls, sat on hold through a patchwork of muzak and canned apologies, and when a human voice returned, I explained the situation with measured clarity. "Yes, Madame Walker. I see you are listed as the primary contact," the agent said after a thorough search of her systems. There will be cancellation fees, but we can process refunds to the original form of payment. It may take up to 14 business days, but you will receive notice. The math wasn't perfect fees carved into the total like small teeth, but the airline promised close to half the flight cost back. $14,000 give or take would return to me. Each refund felt less like money and more like reclamation evidence that transactions could be unwound, that what they'd tried to turn into a one-way gift could, after all, be righted. At times, amid the clicks and holds, the moral tugs returned. A voicemail from Lena drifted in during a hold, a tiny thread of voice wrapped in fear. "Grandma, we're okay. Mom says it's temporary." Something in my chest softened, and for a heartbeat, I pictured myself rewriting the calendar, buying another ticket, sharing a hotel room, smoothing over the tear with love. But then I thought of the laugh Maya gave me at the gate and the low, contemptuous words in the mall. Compassion had to be measured with consequence. By late afternoon, I had a folder on my desktop labeled cancellations, filled with PDFs, confirmation numbers, cancellation codes, an email from the river cruise stating that the refund had been initiated. I printed each page, stacking the paper with the reverence of a ledger keeper. Robert had taught me the value of tidy records. Tonight, they served as armor. When the last confirmation chimed in, I allowed myself a slow, deliberate breath. The unraveling was not complete. Flight still had penalties. There were restaurant deposits to contend with, but the pattern was shifting. The thread I had pulled began to show seams. What had looked like an elegant tapestry of deceit was fraying. I brewed another cup of tea and opened a blank document. Words moved across the screen as easily as any ledger entry. If I am not part of this family for which my money paid, then my money will not be the engine of their plans. I typed, deleted, typed again until the sentence sat on the page like a small hard coin. I saved the file, then printed it on my good stationery, folded it into a neat rectangle, and slid it into my coat pocket. I did not plan to be cruel. I planned to be seen. The printer whirred in the quiet of my dining room, sliding out a single sheet of heavy cream paper. I had chosen my best stationery, the box Robert once gave me when I took over writing the family holiday cards. The weight of the paper mattered. It needed to feel deliberate, undeniable. I sat with pen in hand, rehearsing the words in my mind before I wrote them down. No explanations, no bargaining. Just the truth pared down to its sharpest edge. If I'm not invited, neither is my money. I signed nothing left, no flourish. Just the sentence centered on the page, black ink against cream. I folded it once carefully and slid it into a plain envelope. When I held it in my palm, it felt heavier than it should, as though it carried not only ink and paper, but the years of enabling that had brought me here. For a time, I sat at the table staring at it, listening to the tick of the clock above the stove. Was this petty? Was I lowering myself? The questions came insistent, but I pushed them aside. This wasn't spite. This was acknowledgement. If my daughter insisted I had no seat at the table, then she would discover what it meant to plan a feast without a host. I tucked the envelope into my coat pocket, the edges pressing into the fabric with each step I took. At dawn, I drove back to JFK, blending in with the tide of travelers pushing luggage toward security. My plan wasn't complicated, but it required the sort of calm I hadn't always possessed. I walked slowly, watching, waiting. Maya stood near the boarding gate, her carry-on propped against her leg as she fussed with her scarf. I saw the corner of her makeup bag half unzipped, sticking out of the pocket. She had always been careless with small things, confident that someone else me would notice and fix them. My pulse hammered, but my hands were steady. I moved close, pretending to adjust my coat, and slipped the envelope into the makeup bag. The gesture was quick, no more suspicious than tucking away a tissue. She didn't notice. She was laughing at something Lena said. her voice bright and airy, as though nothing in the world weighed on her. I stepped back, exhaling slowly. Around me, announcements echoed, and children tugged at their parents' sleeves, asking about airplanes. I was just another traveler, though I carried no ticket. Leaving the terminal, I pressed my hand to my pocket, now empty, and felt an unexpected lightness. The letter was no longer mine. It belonged to the trip they had tried to steal from me. They would find it when the unraveling was already well underway, perhaps at the hotel desk, perhaps later when they searched for a passport or lipstick. And when they did, they would know the woman they dismissed at the gate had left her mark. The cab ride back to Westchester felt different from the night before. The city skyline glinted in the distance, and I let the satisfaction settle over me like a second skin. The cancellations were already in motion, the refunds already dripping back into my account. The letter was only a coda, a small seed planted in their luggage. They had taken me for a silent, compliant benefactor. But now, each mile I put between myself and that terminal, I understood. Silence was over. The flight touched down in Paris, under a slate-colored morning sky, the kind of winter light that made the streets gleam as though polished by rain. At Charles de Gaulle, Maya led her family through customs with brisk confidence, her designer coat fluttering behind her. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind, the first steps onto Parisian soil. The triumphant check-in at the Plaza Arc. The glow of satisfaction when her children realized she had orchestrated everything. Theo dragged his suitcase without enthusiasm. Lena stayed half a step behind, eyes glued to her phone. To her, neither of them said much. Michael trailed at the rear, shoulders hunched, as if trying to make himself smaller. But Maya didn't let their silence trouble her. In her mind, this was the beginning of a perfect holiday. The taxi dropped them at the Plaza Arc just after 9. Its marble lobby glittered with garlands of gold and pine, the scent of polished wood and citrus cleaner heavy in the air. Maya strode to the desk, passport in hand. "Reservation for Walker?" she announced, her voice lilting with pride. The receptionist tapped at her keyboard, eyes scanning the screen. Her smile faltered. "Madame, I'm afraid I don't see an active booking under that name." "Perhaps there is another spelling." Maya laughed lightly. "It's under my mother's name, Evadne Walker. 2 adjoining suites, flexible rate." More tapping. A pause. The receptionist looked apologetic. "Yes, I do see a booking that was canceled yesterday. Full refund requested." "I'm very sorry." The words hit harder than turbulence. Maya blinked, leaned forward. "Canceled? No, that's impossible. We just flew here. There must be a mistake." The receptionist gestured toward the screen. "The system shows the reservation was canceled by the primary holder. Refund to the original payment method." Michael's face drained of color. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Maya, what is going on?" She waved him off, her hands suddenly clammy. "This is some computer glitch. Let me call." She fumbled with her phone, but each call to the hotel's international line only confirmed what the receptionist had said. The reservation no longer existed. Hours passed in the lobby. Suitcases stacked against the wall. Children slumped in the chairs, fatigue turning sharp around the edges. Maya's smile hardened into a grimace as she tried everything, pleading, arguing, even suggesting she rebook at the same rate. The receptionist remained polite but firm. There were no suites available, not at holiday time. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion clung to them like damp coats. Maya finally agreed to take a pair of smaller, less glamorous rooms at triple the price in a budget hotel across town. The defeat burned her throat. It wasn't until evening, when she unpacked in the dim light of the substitute hotel, that she found the envelope. She had pulled her makeup bag from the side pocket of her carry-on, meaning to freshen her lipstick before dinner. The bag felt heavier than usual. Curious, she unzipped it and pulled out the folded stationery. She recognized the creamy paper. Instantly. Her mother's stationery, the one used for Christmas letters. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. "If I'm not invited, neither is my money." The sentence was stark, centered on the page, unmistakable in her mother's deliberate hand. For a moment, the world tilted. She felt the walls closing in the hum of Parisian traffic below, like a jeer. Michael was watching from the bed, suspicion sharpening in his eyes. Theo glanced up from his comic. Lena's phone slipped from her hand as she read the words over Maya's shoulder. Maya pressed the paper flat against her palm, but her composure cracked. The triumph she had worn at JFK dissolved into something raw, something panicked. She realized then that the trip she had thought she controlled had already begun to unravel thread by thread, click by click, long before the plane touched down. The first call came just after dawn. I had barely finished buttering my toast when the phone lit up with Maya's number. The screen pulsed insistently across the table, vibrating against the wood. I let it ring. When the call rolled to voicemail, another came, then another. By the third, I muted the ringer and carried my plate into the living room. The house was quiet except for the whistle of the radiator and the crunch of my breakfast. Silence had always unnerved me after Robert's death, but this morning, it felt like armor. I set my phone face down, poured myself a second cup of tea, and let the steam rise into my face. A new sound interrupted a chime, then another. Text messages. Curious despite myself, I flipped the phone over. Maya's words filled the screen in bursts. "Glitch at hotel, call them please. They're saying, canceled, fix it. Mom, don't ignore me. You have to call." I placed the phone back on the table and carried my tea to the window. Outside, the maple branches were bare, etched black against a pale sky. The world beyond my glass went about its business, indifferent to one family's chaos. An hour later, another set of messages arrived, sharper this time. "You don't understand, we're in the lobby with luggage. Kids are exhausted. This isn't funny. Pick up. Do something." Still, I didn't move. I rinsed my teacup, dried it carefully, and set it in its place on the rack. My hands found steadiness in these small rituals. Each ignored call steadied me further. By mid-afternoon, the voicemails began. The first was clipped, defensive Maya's voice, brittle with irritation. "Mom, you must have canceled something by mistake. Just admit it and call them back. We can't sit here all day." The second cracked around the edges. "It's freezing out, the kids need a room." Michael's furious. "Please, Mom, call me." By the fifth, desperation replaced arrogance. "We're stuck in Paris with nowhere to go. I don't care about the money anymore, just help us." I listened to none of them in full. I let the phone record blink and fall silent, then tucked it under a cushion. That evening, I made soup lentils simmered slowly with onions and carrots. The smell filled the house, earthy and warm, reminding me of winters when my children were young. Back then, the phone would have rung with neighbors asking for carpools or teachers confirming bake sales. Now, it rang with demands and blame, but I had no obligation to answer. The phone buzzed again. I stirred the soup, hummed softly, and did not reach for it. After dinner, I sat with my knitting. A scarf simple and gray grew beneath my fingers. The rhythm soothed me. With each row, I imagined the hotel lobby in Paris Maya, pacing Michael's jaw tight, the children slouched on their suitcases. They had planned to humiliate me, to erase me from their memory of this trip. Instead, they sat stranded, undone by their own scheme. Another voicemail arrived around 9. This one came from Michael. His voice was low, weary. "Mom, I don't know what's happening. We can't get through to the hotel." Maya's beside herself. The kids are scared. "Please, just tell us what to do." I set the knitting aside, leaned back and closed my eyes. A pang tugged at me. Michael had always been the peacemaker, the child with soft eyes and quick apologies. But he had stood silent at the gate, while his wife dismissed me. Silence, too, has consequences. I turned off the phone completely and placed it in the drawer of the side table. The house fell into pure quiet. Outside, the first flakes of snow began to fall, swirling in the streetlight. I pulled the scarf higher on my needles and let the silence grow thick, protective, final. It was past midnight when the landline rang. Few people ever called it anymore. Most friends texted or emailed. The sound startled me out of a doze on the living room couch, my knitting still tangled in my lap. I reached for the receiver with a flutter of unease. "Grandma." The voice was small, hesitant. "Lena." My chest tightened at once. "Yes. I had to use the hotel lobby phone. Mom doesn't know I'm calling." She took my cell. I sat up straighter, pulse quickening. "What's going on, sweetheart?" For a moment, there was only the faint hum of static. Then Lena's words spilled out in a rush. "We're not at the Plaza Arc. They said the reservation was canceled. We had to move to this little place across the city. It smells like bleach and cigarettes. The beds are tiny and there's no heat. Theo's coughing, and Dad keeps arguing with Mom. She says it's a mistake, but Grandma, is it?" Her voice cracked, and I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. Images crowded in my grandchildren, huddled in a drafty room, winter, pressing against the glass, confusion etched into their faces. I swallowed hard. "You and Theo didn't do anything wrong. Do you understand me? None of this is your fault." "I know." She hesitated, then whispered. "But Mom says you canceled everything to punish her. Did you?" The question pierced me. I could almost hear the weight she carried, standing between loyalty to her parents and love for me. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to soothe with false promises. "I canceled what I paid for Lena," I said quietly, "because your mother made it clear she didn't want me there. Actions have consequences." A silence followed. I wondered if I'd gone too far, if the words sounded harsher than I meant. "But we're stuck," she said finally. "Dad tried calling other hotels, but everything's full or too expensive. Mom keeps saying you'll fix it because you always fix everything." The plea in her voice almost broke me. Every instinct screamed to pick up my card again, to book them a warm suite, to sweep away the cold night pressing on their windows. They were children, my children's children, and I loved them more fiercely than I could admit. I thought of Robert, how he once told me during a rough patch with Michael, "If you keep rescuing them, Evadne, they'll never learn to swim." The memory steadied me now. "Listen to me, darling," I said, my voice gentler. "You and Theo will be all right. You have your father there. You have each other. This mess isn't yours to clean up." Her breathing grew shaky. "I just don't understand why Mom would do this. Why she'd say you weren't invited. We all thought you were coming. I was so excited to show you the Christmas market." Tears pricked my eyes. I leaned against the arm of the couch, the ache in my chest nearly unbearable. "I know. I wanted to be there too. But some things have to change. And maybe the hardest lessons are learned this way." "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know, sweetheart. But you're strong. Stronger than you think. I love you, Lena. Tell Theo I love him too." A muffled voice in the background, Maya calling sharply. Lena gasped. "I have to go. Please don't tell her I called. She'll be furious." The line went dead, leaving only the hum of silence in my ear. I set the receiver down slowly, staring at the darkened window. Snowflakes drifted in the streetlight outside, fragile and fleeting. My heart ached, torn between the children's voices and the knowledge that to intervene now would only confirm Maya's belief that I could be controlled by guilt. I wrapped the scarf tighter around my shoulders and forced myself to stay seated to let the silence hold. Sometimes love meant saving, and sometimes painfully it meant letting consequences play out. The call came in the middle of a gray afternoon. I had been in the kitchen rolling out dough for a pie I promised my neighbor's children when the phone rang with an unfamiliar international number. I nearly ignored it, thinking it a scam, but something in my gut urged me to answer. Mrs. Walker. The man's voice was measured, carrying a French lilt. This is Inspector Dubois with the Paris Police Prefecture. I am calling about your daughter and her family. My heart clenched. Are they hurt? No, madame, not hurt. They are being detained at a precinct. The hotel where they are staying filed a complaint of non-payment. They attempted to leave without settling their account. The manager insists the bill must be resolved before release. For a moment, the rolling pin slipped in my hand. I pressed my palm against the counter, willing myself to stay calm. What about the children? My grandchildren. They are with their parents. They are not accused of anything, of course, but they cannot be released alone. The bill is approximately 2,000 euros for 3 nights, plus meals charged to the room. Payment can be arranged by international wire or credit card. I closed my eyes. In my mind, I saw Lena's pale face during her midnight call, Theo's cough in the cold room. They were trapped in a police station, now surrounded by strangers speaking rapid French. The thought carved me open. But then came Maya's voice in memory, clear and smug. She'll learn. Money doesn't buy you a place. The inspector's voice waited patiently. Madam, shall I have the hotel send you the authorization form? I gripped the counter. If I paid, I would be rescuing Maya yet again, reinforcing the cycle that had stripped me of dignity and savings. But if I refused, my grandchildren would spend Christmas Eve in a police station that I could not bear. Yes, I said, the word sharp in my throat. But listen carefully. I will pay only the basic charges for the children's sake. Room taxes and meals already taken, nothing else. Of course, he replied. His tone remained professional, but I imagined the faintest note of approval. The hotel will contact you within the hour. True to his word, an email arrived. I printed the authorization form, filled in the numbers, and signed with a steady hand. As I faxed it back, I wrote a note across the margin. This payment is for the release of minors only. No further charges authorized. When the confirmation email landed in my inbox, I sat down at the table and exhaled deeply. I had drawn my line. Compassion, yes, but not surrender. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Michael, his voice weary and subdued. Mom. Thank you. They let us go. The kids are back at the hotel. I know you didn't do it for me or Maya, but thank you anyway. I didn't answer right away. My silence stretched until he added, I'll figure the rest out. You won't hear another request from us. I ended the call with no reply, staring at the frost etching itself along the kitchen window. Outside, the world was quiet, hushed under the weight of falling snow. I thought of Lena and Theo, finally warm again, and hoped they could feel the invisible thread I had tried to extend, not to their parents, but to them. I wiped the flour from my counter, slid the pie into the oven, and sat down with a fresh cup of tea. I had stepped in only as far as my conscience allowed. No further. The line was clear now, and I would not cross it again. Christmas morning broke with a hush over Westchester. The snow had stopped in the night, leaving the streets muffled and shining under a pale sky. I woke to the stillness, the kind that presses against the windows and makes every sound inside your own house feel magnified. The kettle's whistle, the scrape of a chair against wood, the creak of a stair, all reminders that the world here was steady, untroubled. I dressed slowly, choosing the red sweater Robert always liked, though it had been years since anyone noticed. In the past, I'd be bustling about by now, preparing a turkey or arranging the dining table for family. But this Christmas, there was no chaos, no door slamming, no voices calling through the hallway. Only me, the scent of coffee, and the glow of snow reflecting through the curtains. By mid-morning, I bundled up and walked to the small Episcopal church at the corner. Its bells rang out carols as parishioners trickled inside, cheeks flushed from the cold. I sat near the back, listening to the choir sing, "O come, all ye faithful." The voices swelled and lifted toward the vaulted ceiling, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a kind of serenity wrap itself around me. After the service, a few neighbors stopped me curious smiles on their faces. Mrs. Donnelly, from 2 houses down, touched my sleeve. "Back already? I thought you were in Paris." I forced a gentle smile. "Plans changed." "That's a shame," she said, shaking her head. "But we're glad to see you. Come by later, we've got more food than we can possibly eat." I promised I would, though I knew I wouldn't. My strength felt too newly forged to spend it explaining. Some truths are better tended in silence. Back home, I set the kettle on again and laid out a simple lunch soup bread cheese. I ate slowly at the kitchen table, savoring each bite as though the act itself was a small rebellion against all that had been taken. I thought of Maya and Michael, of Lena and Theo adrift in Paris's winter crowds, chasing warmth they hadn't earned. The thought might have once filled me with bitterness. Now it simply passed through me like the wind outside, cold, but no longer sharp. In the afternoon, I settled into the armchair by the window, with a book I had been meaning to read for years. The snow outside glittered untouched, and the quiet pressed close, like a familiar companion. Every so often, I caught myself listening for the phone, expecting it to ring with another desperate plea. But it stayed silent. Either they had found another way to manage, or they had learned I meant what I said. Evening came softly. I lit a single candle and placed it on the mantel beside Robert's photograph. His eyes smiled at me from behind the glass, steady and kind. I raised my teacup toward him. A small toast. "Merry Christmas, love," I whispered. The loneliness was there, of course, it always was. But it felt different now. Not the hollow kind that gnawed, but a quieter solitude, one I could carry without shame. The house no longer seemed empty. It seemed mine. I wrapped myself in a blanket, the book resting on my lap, and let the candle burn low. Outside, laughter drifted faintly from a neighbor's gathering, muffled by snow and distance. I closed my eyes and breathed in the silence, realizing it was the first Christmas in years. I felt no pretense, no strings pulled by guilt or expectation. It was not the Christmas I had imagined, but it was one I chose. And that made all the difference. The day after New Year's, I was in the kitchen rinsing coffee cups when the crunch of tires on frozen gravel carried through the window. I dried my hands on a dish towel and peered out. A dark SUV idled in my driveway, exhaust curling like smoke into the pale winter air. Maya stepped out first, bundled in her camel coat, her sunglasses hiding half her face, though the sun was weak. Michael followed, slower, his shoulders sagging under invisible weight. In the back seat, I caught a glimpse of Lena pressed against the window, her eyes fixed on the house. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. The cold hit my face, sharp as glass, but I stood tall on the porch. "Mom, we need to talk." Maya called, her voice clipped. "This isn't the place," I answered evenly. She strode forward, boots crunching against the snow, her arms folded tight. "You humiliated us. Do you have any idea what you put us through? Paris was a disaster, and the kids?" The back door of the SUV opened before she could finish. Lena slipped out, her movements quick, furtive, like a bird escaping a cage. She didn't look at her mother. She didn't look at her father. She headed straight for me. "Grandma," she said softly. I stepped aside, and she crossed the porch into the warmth of the house without a word. The scent of her shampoo, faint and sweet, followed her past me like a reminder that not everything was broken. Maya stopped at the bottom of the steps, fists tightening at her sides. "She's not staying here," she snapped. I shook my head. "You don't dictate who enters my home." She's my daughter. And she's my granddaughter, I said, calmly, each word deliberate. You may argue with me, Maya, but not here. Not in front of her and not in my driveway. Michael shifted uneasily behind her, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He looked at me, once his eyes full of something that might have been apology, then dropped his gaze. Mom, he began, his voice low. Maybe we should. Maya spun on him, her tone sharp as ice. Don't you dare take her side. I'm not, he muttered. I'm just saying this isn't the time. For a moment, silence hung in the cold air. I could hear the faint hum of the car engine, the chirp of a sparrow in the frozen hedge. My heart pounded, but my face remained still. You've made your choices, I said, finally directing my words to Maya. And I've made mine. If you want to speak with me, it won't be on the curb like quarrelsome neighbors. Make an appointment or write a letter. But don't come storming into my yard demanding explanations. Her mouth opened as if to unleash another retort. But something in my stance, maybe the steadiness she wasn't used to, halted her. She snapped her sunglasses back onto her face, turned on her heel, and climbed into the SUV. Michael lingered a second longer. Mom, thank you for letting her in. His breath fogged in the air. Then he followed his wife into the car. The vehicle backed out, the sound of tires crunching over the driveway, fading into the distance. I stood there until the taillights disappeared, the cold seeping through my sweater. When I finally closed the door, Lena was waiting in the hallway, her hands wrapped around a mug of cocoa she'd made for herself. Her eyes were red, but she managed a small, tentative smile. Thanks for not yelling back, she whispered. I brushed a strand of hair from her face and kissed her forehead. Some doors, I said softly, are worth guarding. Together we walked into the kitchen, leaving the winter and its echoes outside. The house had finally settled into its usual quiet. Outside, the snow still lay heavy on the hedges, softening the world, but inside, the silence felt charged. Lena sat at the dining table with my old laptop open, her face illuminated by its pale light. She had asked if she could show me something, her voice hesitant as though unsure if she was breaking a rule. When I stepped closer, I saw a list of bank statements spread across the screen, numbers, dates, line items that stretched back farther than I expected. Mom left these open yesterday, Lena whispered, her hands trembling slightly. I don't think she meant me to see them, but I did. I lowered myself into the chair beside her. The columns were familiar checks I had written, transfers I had made, all under the heading of family help. The total at the bottom of the page stopped my breath. $47,000. In 1 year. Lena clicked to another file, a folder of PDFs. It goes back farther, she murmured. Mortgage payments, car notes, school tuition, groceries sometimes. Her voice thinned. They said you just wanted to help. I leaned back, pressing a hand against my chest as though to steady the weight pressing there. The Paris trip, for all its cruelty, was not an aberration. It was part of a ledger, a careful pattern of expectation. Each dollar turned into an obligation. 47,000 in a single year. That wasn't generosity. That was erosion. Bit by bit, I had let my own security wash away, believing love required it. My eyes skimmed the list again. $2,100 to cover their late mortgage. $700 for Theo's soccer camp. $400 for Lena's braces installment. I remembered each request framed as emergencies, softened by promises to pay me back. But repayment never came. And I never demanded it. Lena closed the laptop, unable to meet my gaze. Grandma, I didn't know. I thought Dad made enough. They never said it was you. Her shoulders curled inward, shame settling where it didn't belong. I reached across and took her hand. This isn't on you, darling. Don't you dare carry it. She nodded faintly, but her eyes glistened. Mom said it was guilt money, that you gave it because you didn't know how else to be part of our lives. The words landed like a stone dropped into my chest. guilt money. My throat tightened. All those checks, all those transfers were not seen as kindness, but as the price of admission. I rose slowly, walking to the window, where the glass reflected a pale, weary woman back at me. 68 years old, widowed with a pension and savings I had guarded for decades, only to see it siphoned by those who claimed to love me most. The fury came then quiet, but sharp, like a blade sliding from its sheath. I had blamed myself for being naive, for trusting too much, but this was not naivety, it was exploitation. And seeing it laid bare in numbers hardened something inside me. Behind me, Lena's voice was soft. I wanted you to know because I don't think they'll ever stop asking. Not unless you make them. I turned back her face, pale but resolute. For all her 16 years, she carried the clarity her parents lacked. I knelt beside her chair, squeezed her hand again. Thank you for showing me. I needed to see it this way. The ledger was more than money. It was proof of a pattern that would stretch on until I said no. The Paris betrayal hadn't appeared from nowhere. It had been built brick by brick on the foundation of guilt I allowed. Now I understood the truth. Love should never be tallied in dollars, and I would not pay another cent to prove my place in a family that measured affection as debt. The following week, I sat across from James Morrison, my attorney of 20 years. His office smelled faintly of leather and old books, the kind of place where every decision seemed to carry weight. Through the frosted window behind him, I could see the Hudson River glinting under a weak winter sun. James adjusted his glasses pen, poised over his legal pad. You sounded urgent on the phone, Evadine. Tell me what's happened, I told him. Not every detail. I didn't mention the letter in Maya's suitcase, nor the exact flavor of humiliation at JFK, but enough. The canceled reservations, the abandoned ticket, the calls I ignored, and Lena's discovery of years of financial drain. His face remained composed, but I saw the flicker of something sharp behind his eyes. When I finished, he leaned back, folding his hands. This isn't generosity anymore, he said softly. This is elder financial abuse, and it doesn't get better without intervention. The word abuse landed heavy. I had tiptoed around it, calling it guilt, calling it family dynamics, calling it love misapplied. But hearing him name it out loud was both devastating and clarifying. I want to protect the children, I said firmly. Lena and Theo deserve futures their parents can't mortgage. College funds, graduate school, whatever they choose. But Maya and Michael must not touch a cent. James nodded, jotting notes. Education trusts irrevocable, set in their names with a trustee outside the family. That way neither parent can access the principal or divert funds. Relief washed through me. Good. And the rest? That depends. Do you want to leave them anything? I shook my head slowly. No, not them. The house, the investments, all of it should go to charity. Something that builds, not drains. His pen scratched across the page. We can amend your will immediately. I'll draft the revisions this week. Maya and Michael will be explicitly excluded as beneficiaries. The trusts will be funded and managed independently. When you pass the distributions, we'll bypass your daughter entirely. The steadiness in his voice made the decision feel less like a rupture and more like construction, building a wall perhaps, but one that let light through where it mattered. Will they contest it? I asked. Almost certainly, James replied. But with clear documentation of your intent, plus the evidence of financial transfers over the years, they won't stand a chance. Paper Mrs. Walker can be a shield when wielded correctly. I thought of the folder Lena had shown me, the long columns of numbers, like a slow bleed. Paper had recorded my years of capitulation. Now it would record my refusal. James slid a fresh sheet across the desk. I'll need your signature here to authorize the changes. And again, once the documents are prepared. My hand didn't tremble as I signed. For once, the act of putting pen to paper didn't feel like relinquishing power. It felt like claiming it back. When I looked up, James studied me for a moment. You know this will change the relationship forever. I exhaled steady. It already has. This just gives the truth teeth. We rose, shook hands, and I stepped out into the brittle January cold. The wind off the Hudson stung my cheeks, but I felt lighter than I had in years. For too long, I had let love be written in checks, boundaries drawn in pencil. Now at last, they were etched in ink, permanent, unyielding. Paper shields guarding what mattered, protecting who deserved it, and ensuring that respect, if not given freely, would no longer be purchased at my expense. I asked them to come on a Sunday afternoon. No tricks, no ambush. Just the living room where birthdays had once been celebrated, where stockings had once hung by the fire. I had set out nothing more than a carafe of water and 3 glasses. It was deliberate, stripped of pretense. Maya arrived first, clicking across the hardwood floor in boots too fine for the weather. She sat straight-backed, eyes sharp behind her sunglasses, though she removed them quickly, scanning the room as if searching for weaknesses. Michael followed slower, his face lined from weeks of strain. Lena lingered in the doorway until I nodded gently. She slipped upstairs, leaving the 3 of us alone. I unfolded the letter James had helped me prepare. The paper was crisp, formal, the words measured. My voice was calm as I read aloud. For the past 5 years, I have provided financial support to this household. Mortgage payments, tuition, vacations, emergency funds. Last year alone, the amount totaled $47,000. This pattern ends today. There will be no further financial assistance. The trusts for Lena and Theo's education are secured, untouchable by anyone but their future selves. All other assets will bypass you entirely and be directed to charitable causes. Consider this the final withdrawal from my account into yours. The silence, after I finished, was thick. Michael lowered his head into his hands. Maya leaned forward, lips curling. You can't be serious, she said, her voice low, venomous. After everything we've done to keep you in this family, you're cutting us out. You'll never see Lena or Theo again if you go through with this. Her words sliced through the room, but they no longer found purchase. I folded the letter back into its envelope and laid it on the table between us. You don't hold that power anymore, I said. My tone wasn't angry, just steady. Lena is 16. Theo is 14. In a few years, they'll be free to decide who they want in their lives. Threats only build resentment, Maya, and not against me. For the first time, I saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came. The balance had shifted, and she knew it. Michael finally spoke, his voice rough. Mom, I don't know how to fix this. I know we've taken too much. But cutting us out completely. You made those choices. I interrupted gently. You chose silence at the airport. You chose to let my money become your lifeline instead of building your own. I won't carry it any longer. He nodded slowly, grief written across his face. But he didn't argue. Maya, on the other hand, shot to her feet. You'll regret this, she hissed. I remained seated. No, Maya. I regret every year I mistook enabling for love. This is clarity. She turned on her heel, her boots striking hard against the floor as she stormed out. Michael lingered a moment, then followed. Shoulders slumped. The door shut with a finality that echoed in the quiet house. I leaned back in my chair, the envelope still resting on the table. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift from my chest. The account was closed. The balance was mine again. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm I hadn't known in years. My phone no longer buzzed with demands for transfers or whispered requests to cover a bill. Instead, it rang at quieter times and with different voices. Theo was the first. One Saturday morning, as I was pruning the last stubborn leaves from the rose bush in my front yard, his voice piped through the line, bright and eager. Grandma, I scored a goal today, left foot top corner. His excitement tumbled over itself, unfiltered, unshaped by anyone else. For 10 full minutes, he told me every detail of the game, every pass, every cheer from the sidelines. I listened, smiling into the cold air, and when he finally paused for breath, I said, "I'm proud of you, sweetheart." It felt like planting something new, small, alive, rooted in truth rather than obligation. A few days later, Lena called. She had news, her voice hushed, as though she didn't want it overheard at home. "Grandma, the trust the lawyer said it's real. It means I don't have to worry about tuition. I can apply to any college I want." I could hear the wonder in her tone, the freedom blooming as she spoke. For the first time, she was thinking about her future, as hers alone, not as collateral for her parents' ambitions. I promised I'd be at her graduation no matter what, and she laughed a sound so light, so unburdened, that it caught me off guard. As for Maya, her presence retreated into something cooler, more formal. She sent polite holiday cards, each with a stiff signature at the bottom, no more elaborate than what she might send a distant colleague. It suited me. Distance could be a kind of peace, too. The house, once echoing with emptiness, now held a different silence. It wasn't hollow. It was steady. On mornings when the snow lay crisp outside, I brewed tea and settled by the window with my roses. The plants had surprised me, though the season was cruel, though frost clung to the panes. Tiny buds still formed defiant and tender. I trimmed one bloom carefully and set it in a small glass jar on the sill. The winter light poured over it, making the petals glow faintly pink against the pale sky. For a moment, I simply watched it, feeling my own life mirrored in its persistence. Behind me, the phone rang again. It was Theo calling to tell me about next week's match. I let the rose catch the light a little longer before answering. Peace didn't arrive with fanfare. It came slowly, like a plant in winter, surviving, waiting, ready to flower when the time was right. And as I sat in the glow of the window listening to my grandson chatter about soccer, I understood that some things respect dignity. Love freely chosen could bloom even in the coldest season. The morning broke clear and pale over Westchester, the kind of winter day when the air felt sharper than glass, but the light was kind. I woke early, the house still hushed, and padded downstairs in my slippers. The floor creaked familiarly beneath me, the sound of a space that had carried my life for decades. On the kitchen counter, a single rose waited in a small glass jar. I had cut it the day before from the bush by the window, a stubborn bloom that had pushed itself open despite the cold. Its petals were a deep blush, edges tinged with frost when I'd first clipped it. Now, in the warmth of the house, it had unfurled, fragile yet steady. I carried it carefully into the living room, where Robert's photograph stood on the mantel. His eyes looked back at me, kind and amused, just as they had on the day it was taken. I placed the rose beside him, adjusting the jar so the light caught it just so. For a moment, I let myself imagine him there, sitting in his chair with the paper folded neatly on his lap, telling me in his measured way that I had finally learned the lesson he always tried to teach. Strength is quieter than shouting, firmer than giving in. I brewed a cup of tea and sat at the dining table with my notebook. For months now, it had been my place of reckoning, where I tallied numbers, planned responses, and gathered courage. Today, it held only a stack of blank index cards and a pen. On the top card, I wrote in deliberate strokes, "Respect, not pity, is the fare to ride in my life." I read it once, twice, letting the words sink into me. They weren't a threat nor a plea. They were a declaration, plain and final. I pinned the card to the corkboard by the kitchen, where bills and grocery lists used to hang. Now it would greet me each morning, a compass I could follow without hesitation. The phone rang just after 8. It was Lena calling before school. Her voice was light, full of excitement about a college application essay she had finished. "I think you'll like it, Grandma. It's about resilience, about learning when to say no." I smiled, listening pride filling me in a way no bank statement ever could. Later, Theo left a message about his upcoming soccer match, promising to call afterward with the score. Their voices were steady threads pulling me forward, proof that love did not vanish when money dried up. It flourished, freed from the weight of transaction. I spent the rest of the morning tending the roses by the window, trimming back stems, coaxing buds from the green that had survived the frost. The light poured in, warming the glass panes, softening the edges of winter. Outside, the world was still cold, but inside, something had shifted. The house felt less like an empty echo of what I'd lost, and more like a refuge filled with a kind of peace I hadn't dared expect. When the kettle whistled again, I poured myself another cup and returned to the mantel. The rose by Robert's photo glowed in the light, a small defiance against winter, a quiet emblem of endurance. I touched the glass frame gently, then sat back, letting the silence of the room enfold me. For the first time in years, I felt no weight pressing on my shoulders, no fear of what the next phone call might demand. Only clarity, only calm. Respect was the ticket, and at last I knew I held it firmly in my own hands.